what a lovely day here, certainly, and welcome to everybody, morning, afternoon, or evening. And we have a very special session today, as we do every week, I suppose. We congratulate Jeremiah. I think last time you were with us, you may not have been a doctor yet, and now you are a doctor. So we congratulate you from Stanford University. And you have brought us a very interesting conversation today, and I'm going to let you explain to us who you've brought along and what it's all about. Jeremiah, unmute.
Thank you so much, Geraldine, for the introduction and for the opportunity to address this wonderful group of practitioners and scholars today. For the past 5 years, approximately, I've been doing field work with young cantors in the Chassidic community in Brooklyn, with a group of singers who I have identified as being revivalists of early 20th century styles of recorded cantorial music. But the story is a bit, as is often the case when the term revival is put into play, the story is a bit more complex than simply one of death and rebirth. Many of the cantors who I worked with did in fact have family lineages in Jewish music, and this was especially the case for one of the cantors who I have known now for about 5 years, Yoel Kohn, and who I've become friends with. Yoel and I have done a number of presentations together over the years. I had him out to Stanford for a concert, which was a wonderful experience, and we had a presentation at YIVO just before the pandemic began in February of 2020. And Yoel's dad is Meier Boruch Kohn, who is a revered figure in the Satmar liturgical music scene. He's a Baal Tefillah who has a unique approach to prayer leading that in some ways seeks to synthesize Hasidic approaches to prayer with chazonos. And he's one of the great living artists in the world of Jewish music, and I'm grateful to Yoel for facilitating our meeting. And last week, when I was in New York for the first time in 14 months, I'm from New York, and because of the pandemic, of course, there was no traveling. But my family, my wife and I are vaccinated now, and we were able to travel back to visit family and also to do some more field work. So I went out to Williamsburg and met with Yoel and with his father, Meier Boruch Kohn. And our presentation today will not be live, right? It's a videotaped conversation on Zoom. So I believe maybe that's enough of an introduction, and if you think it right, I'll begin the screen share and play the video for everyone. Does that sound good, Geraldine?
Fine.
All right. Well, then let's begin. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Meier Boruch Kohn, and we'll be joined in a moment by Meier Boruch's son, Yoel Kohn. Both Meier Boruch and Yoel are cantors, Baal Tefillahs, experts in Jewish liturgical music, and we're here in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and I'm going to be speaking to Meier Boruch about his work as a Baal Tefillah and his education as a singer, and some other topics might come up along the way as well. Meier Boruch, thank you so much for giving us your time today. What I'd like to start by asking you if you could tell the story of your life. Now, you don't have to give me every single detail, but I would like to know the basic chapters, and with a particular emphasis on the role of music in your life, and especially how you came to have your special knowledge of Nusakh.
Okay. Let me explain you something.
Yes.
When I was a kid, let me give you an idea of when I was like about 7, 8 years old. Okay? In my father's house, basically the music was Yossele Rosenblatt, Zavu Kvarten, Mordechai Hershman, David Reutmann. I grew up with that.
What year were you born in?
What?
What year were you born in? What time period was this?
1963. Okay. So, let's say Yossele Rosenblatt was going on for like day and night. So when I was already like 8, 9 years old, I would say a lot of these shtickler of Yossele Rosenblatt was already singing in my head, like in my dream. Okay? And I had a very, how should I call it? So, how would you say that?
Yo, how would you translate?
It drew me very strongly.
Yeah, very much. When I heard a chazan, a good chazan, doesn't matter. Since I was a kid, 8, 9 years old, I always liked to listen to a nice chazan.
Now,
Of course, only when he was in good tuning,
Right,
not
no.
when he went off.
are you talking about on records specifically, or
No,
in
even
the,
in life, everything, all the time.
where did you hear chazans in davening or in concerts?
Oh, no, I wasn't that type of. I wasn't brought up that way. That my father took me to concerts.
Okay.
He never did. But when a chazan came to like the besmedrash where we davened, like was the Satmar besmedrash in COZ Road, every time when a chazan was there, I liked to listen and I liked to hear a good line if he said something which was for me a chidush. I don't know how you want to say
Innovation.
that. Yeah, I liked it very much. The most liked about Philip, which I heard in my life, was this person, which his name was Reb Shlomo Rosen. Okay, he lived in London. He was a shoichet, and the great thing about him was, although he was a Chassidic Balt Philip, which most of the times, a lot of these Chassidic Balt Philips, they don't really know fine tuning and music. They don't really know how to say a good piece of Nusakh with how should I call it, with the musical part of it, and also these colorature things. You know what colorature is? Of
Sure.
course you do.
Yes.
Okay, but this Reb Shlomo Rosen was unique. He was a Chassidic Shabbat Philip, and he knew how to make these nice things in the Nusakh. Like a lot of things that I adopted in the Nusakh of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is based on his mahalach. How would you say mahalach?
His approach, his style.
His approach, his style. Now, I wouldn't say that all I'm saying is what he said.
Right.
No, most probably, you have to understand one thing. I was a kid. I listened to him since I was about 8, 9 years old till about 16.
No, you said he was in London.
Yeah.
Were you living in London at the time?
Yeah.
You were born in
I'm born in London. I was brought up in London. I got married over here in 1984. And he was born in 1985.
Yeah, Yoel is your first son.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's my Bechar.
Let me join in.
Yes, please.
Okay, so now let's go further on.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
so I was brought up.
Can we talk about Shlomo Rosen?
Yeah.
Did you sit with him? Did you go take lessons with him?
No, this is what I'm going to tell you now. I never took lessons from him. He never knew in his life that I'm the one who's listening to him so strongly and trying to understand every single word he says.
So later on, when you became well known as a Baal Tefillah, did he know that you were
No,
working?
he didn't know anything about that.
well
I
ahead.
was when I was well known, he wasn't around anymore because he passed away. He was nifted in 1990. He passed away in 1990.
He passed away. So he passed away in 1990.
Yeah.
And you were when did you have your first job as a tefilah?
Oh, that's a good question.
1988.
1988. Yeah.
And that was here in Williamsburg?
Here in Williamsburg.
That is Nusakh.
I see. And
Not in Rahma.
Right.
What's
Nusakh?
This is us St. George.
so
I remember like the first shul that I went to.
Yeah.
That I'm
Yeah.
so
Wow.
so I remember the first year that Dam Padam. I was
Amazing.
like surprised because
did you hear your father davening in the house or singing in the house?
because when my father wouldn't take me to shul when I was like a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, I wouldn't take me to shul if he had to daven because I was a pretty ill-behaved child. So it wasn't until he became shamash and sigid that I would come even, and then he stopped davening as much because he was too busy. In the sigid is nicht gedammt, as I said. You didn't daven.
Oh, it's not doch New York.
Yeah. I'm saying no, not the Shabbos. Just saying, just regular Shabbos. I'm talking about regular
So
Shabbos.
you were the regular, not just high holidays, not just Yom and Ryan. You were all the time. There every Shabbos or just Rosh Chodesh,
my main thing was Rosh Hashanah and Kippur.
I see.
On a normal Shabbos, yeah, but there wasn't something.
Okay.
So
Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur
Uh-huh.
was the thing which made this so famous was
Uh-huh.
because, like I told you before,
Yeah.
you see the Hasidic Baltfilis,
Right.
they didn't even know, like in their dreams, that it's possible to make this Nusakh so rich
Right.
and so musical.
Now, what about Shlomo Rosen? But
He did.
He was a Satmar, or
No, he was basically a Baba V'chusa.
Above. Okay.
But he
But
does
he was still from a Hasidic background.
Yeah,
not
he
from,
was Hasidic.
Yeah. So this is okay. I mean,
So-
to me, this is very
so-
interesting because I'm sorry.
He was unique. This is what I said before.
We know from history that there's kind of the most famous cantors of these golden age cantors. They might have been born Hasidic, but they
Yeah.
did not lead their lives as Hasidim for the most part.
Well, Yosef was also Hasidic.
That's true. He's kind of the big exception, though, right?
Yeah, and I have news for you that Kvarten was also Hasidic.
Of course, he was from.
background.
Oh yeah, I've read Mein Leben. I know.
You read it?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting book.
Wonderful book.
Okay.
But in America, his profile, his big jobs were in reforms and things.
Yeah.
So
You know why?
Right.
You know why?
that's where he made a living.
That's when you need the money.
Yeah, of
That's
course.
all.
Yeah.
That's
It's-
why he robbed banks. That's
It's
the guy
all
why he
about
robs.
money.
But I'm curious about how. So you're describing in the Hasidic world, there isn't a kind of a culture of cantors, right?
No.
The Baltfilas don't know Nusakh in this kind of cantorial,
No, they
sophisticated style that
They
you're talking
don't
about.
know that sophisticated side, and the reason to it. I'll tell you even the reason.
Yes.
The reason is simple, because the cantors, all these in the old home, in the outer Heim,
Mm-hmm.
you have to understand, every person who had a little bit of a higher level of any kind of profession wouldn't just stay in this small community and not try to make a big living out of it, because the poorness was so all over the place that anybody who could try to just get out of it would do anything to just get out of it. So Yossel Rosenblatt, David Reutemann, Kvart, and these people, they were musical, and they had the voice how to deliver that, and they were able, they had the ability to make it work and to make it as a nice living. Okay, so where do you go? The Hasidic people didn't want to have that because most of these chazonim weren't acceptable by the Hasidim because there were not enough Yiddishlach, most of them. Although those few, so there weren't a Hasidic Besmedish who was able and was willing to pay for these chazonim. So automatically, what happened? So the Hasidic Rabbaim, they become the Batfilas. They didn't want the chazunim to be the baltfilas. Most of these Hasidic rabbis didn't even know what Nusakh is all about. So Nusakh became third level.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Or 10th level, whatever you want to call it.
Right. So how were you able to
this
enter
Reb
into it?
Shlomo Rosen, he was like I told you, he was exceptional. But you have to know, he didn't have a voice. It was his voice.
Right.
But he was so musical that he knew with this voice how to bring out these nice coloratura and all nice musical things that he said in Nusakh.
Right.
One of a kind.
And remember that he was a Babaver, davening in Satmar in London.
Right.
You needed all of those components. If it were Satmar here, all the positions would have been taken up by the Rebbeische class.
Right.
And if it's because it was in London, it was periphery in Satmar, and in Babav he himself couldn't do it either. So it was just.
No. He could have done it in Bob. The reason why he was in Satmar is this is another thing. The reason what he said is true, definitely true.
Right.
The reason why he davened for the Ummah in London is because there was a Rebbe over there.
The Rebbe is in Brooklyn.
The big Rebbes weren't in London. Because London was a very small community in my days.
Right.
You have to understand, when I was a kid, there was 200 Hasidic families in the whole Stanford. That's all which was.
Of all the different groups?
Of all the different groups, all together.
I see.
So a Rebbe could make a living of it.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So
now in London is the same thing. Now London has its own dynasties.
Right.
So the son of the Ruv and this guy. So there's no Satmar doesn't have any musicality already. It's no longer a condition. The shiny heathen, as they call them, get all the charms.
Right.
So, Meier Boruch, how are you able to get the show as the?
Okay. So what happened over here? I, as like a Hasidic man, I davened in that small besmedrish, Rachmaov, which he mentioned before. He said the other bit or whatever. So I davened over there. It happened to be that in that besmedrish there was a few people who had a real good ear, and they said to these people, we listened to him. You know what he is? You know what he's worth for? The name came out. So now there was another besmedrish in Williamsburg, which is still going on, Doshinsky. They, for some reason, the rule of Doshinsky, he deserves a lot of credit. His name was Beryl Katz, Zechron Levucha. He liked a good baltfiller, but the real good one, not the krachtzedige, Hasidic, the real stuff. What we're talking about.
Did they know it from records? Was there a kind of a scene of people loving records?
I don't know how he liked it. For some reason, he liked it.
Okay, good.
And he always, before I was coming around, he always tried to get the best baltfillers for Shachris. He doesn't miss it, and he was quite a good baltfiller. But he wanted for Shachris the best. As a matter of fact, he told me once, in my ear, that if the Gaboim would let me, I would make you daven one day Missiv and one day Shachris, and I would exchange with you the other day Shachris and Missiv.
So on Yom Noraim, you don't daven Musaf?
I do.
You do now? Now you do, okay.
At that point I didn't. I davened only Shachris. But as it happens to be that I don't, sometimes at the second day Rosh Hashanah I did daven Missiv, because that was Smedrish where I davened to begin with, Rachmai Huav, they wanted that I should continue daven Musaf. I davened over there Musaf. The first tefillah that I davened Rosh Hashanah was Musaf. And the only thing I knew was at that point Reb Shlomo Rosen's Nusakh. Then I added on a lot of other stuff. And let me tell you what I added on.
These two.
I added on a lot of Karaten stuff. Because I don't know if you realize, you see, Yoel Rosenblatt is the king of the Chazon. Because he has that beautiful voice, and he has this He has all kinds of capabilities to do with his voice, blah, 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 blah. Whatever that is, doesn't matter. Okay. But in Nusakh, Kvartin is the king. He is the king. So I adopted a lot.
You know that I disagree with that.
Okay.
Well, you're more partial to Carniel.
Oh, Carniel, okay. I'm not talking about Carniel. Carniel is, you see, you can't adopt Carniel stuff in the Hasidic thing.
You can't adopt Cornel stuff anywhere. I mean,
Right,
except by Jackie Mendelson.
It's sort of from a
because
different
he's
world,
insane.
but
Yeah.
But the modes, just loading the reason why I don't think Kvartin was the king is because Kvartin has his one quetch, his one thing. Carniel plays around. Carniel's Havarabba mode is on Havarabba mode. Carniel's Havasolo mode is on. It's Kvartin. Everything is the same thing.
all of his famous
Yeah,
pieces.
but
But he has examples of
I-
other.
Minor major.
You see, when you
And it always
take,
goes back to.
when you take Reb Shlomo Rosen and you mix in Kvartin and a little bit of Yosel, then you have a big variety.
So I'm
This is what I did.
I'm sort of there are two different areas of your music. There's the Nusakh that you learned from Shlomo Rosen and perhaps from some other sources as well, and then there's Chazonis, which you learned from records. It seems.
Yeah.
Now, did you ever train with a teacher about Chazonis? About
No.
what about voice culture?
Voice, yeah.
But you never took lessons from
No,
a teacher.
I'm going to talk about that. Yeah,
Okay.
You want to go to that part?
Why not?
Okay, let's go to that part. Okay, when I started to daven, okay, when you really want to daven nice and you want to make all these kind of karatus and you want to bring out the Nusakh with his full picture, you need to have voice and you need to have some high notes. Somebody is going to sit on the low notes. You're not going to be able to bring out the, how should I call it? Bahaduroi. Nee, wie is dat op de Haduroi? Nee?
What are you talking about?
Majestically. Majestically. You won't be able. It's impossible. It's like it would be hidden in a box.
I see.
You understand what?
Yes, no, that makes sense.
So when I started to daven, I had to use my voice on the high notes.
Right.
And if you don't know how to do that, you get hoarse right away.
Yes.
So I Baruch Hashem gave me a strong voice. I could take that abuse, but I knew that I won't be able to continue for too long like that.
Right.
So the first thing I started. I have an uncle in London. By the way, let me just make a reverse.
Okay.
You know from where I have the chazonis in my
I
blood?
was going to ask you about
In my
this,
blood?
Yeah.
My father was about Philip, but it's not from him.
Okay.
My father has a shagas ari. Had a shagas ari. Like he would break the walls with his voice, but he didn't have the musical skills.
Right.
That comes from my mother's father. His name was Rabbi Tzvi Goodman. He was a really musical person. And a chazan. He was a real chazan. But he didn't have the big voice. He only had that small voice, like Reutmann, like a little bit like Hershman. That was the voice. You know what I mean?
You're talking about this is you're going back 2 generations now. He was, I take it, also in Satmar. He was a Satmar Chassidic.
Yeah, but I didn't hear him. Because when I knew him, when I was a kid, he was already sick and he wasn't able to daven anymore.
But was he your Goodman?
Goodman, that's my mother's name.
Was he a chazan in Satmar or?
No, he was a chazan in Paris and maybe before. Yeah, he was a chazan in London.
He wasn't Romanian.
Yeah, he was a Czechoslovakian.
Okay, and he had a shella in Europe somewhere.
He had a shella in Paris, and then he had in England.
I see.
Yeah,
so,
but before my time.
He came to Paris. He escaped the Nazis. He didn't escape the Nazis. He was an extremely paranoid person. So as soon as the Nazis came to power, he figured Czechoslovakia is unsafe, and he got up and moved to Paris. And he escaped Paris even way before the trouble started there. Like way before the French joined the. He was always ahead of the game.
Right.
He was always worst case scenario kind of guy.
Right.
So he was always a step ahead. So I don't think he was old enough. How old was he when he came to Paris?
Who? My
Yeah,
grandfather? Yiddish.
Yeah, so he started
like 30 years or something like that.
Okay, interesting. So, but you didn't learn from
So
him.
I didn't learn from him. It's just in my blood.
I understand.
So I never learned chazunas to be. I never learned chazunas. I just listened.
Now your father loved the records, but he didn't sing the records.
He didn't sing the records. He couldn't really sing that kind of stuff. He wasn't musical enough. He wasn't enough capable with his voice.
He smoked 3 to 4 packs a day.
Yeah. He wasn't capable with his voice to make all these correlations and all that.
So when you're talking about learning Nusakh, though, did you learn some Nusakh from him? I mean, that would stand to reason.
No, from a side.
You're talking about
from your father?
No, my father, no. I never heard my father daven on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur.
You only heard.
Only heard Reb Shlomo Rosen.
Your father had a job somewhere else.
That's it.
And you went to shul not with your father, but.
That's it.
That's very funny.
But he did teach you. He did relate to you a lot of.
Yeah. Now there's a
great. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. Now my father. That's another thing.
Okay.
See, my father. We're not going in a seder over here.
That's okay.
We're going on a straight line.
Yeah.
It's not on a straight line.
That's good.
My father was listening to a very big chazan, which there's no records from him. His name was Reb Osher Vida. You know Shia Vida?
Oh, of course.
His father's name was Reb Osher Vida. This Reb Osher Vida was, I didn't know him, but it seems to be from the things that I heard from him, not from him direct, from which other people adopted.
Sure.
And I listened to it. He was extremely musical about Nusakh. Extremely musical. Like this Kesser, which is so famous, Kesser. It's his stuff. Yeah, it's his stuff. And that's somebody who's not musical doesn't even know how to say it, not even to compose, of course not. So my father listened to him when he was 10, 11, 12, 13, these few years, and he somehow remembered after the war a lot of these shtikelach, and he set it into a tape, and I learned it from there. But I have to tell you, with all respect to my father, I had to listen to every single piece about 30 times to understand what he's trying to say.
He had a vocal range of a half an octave. So he kept changing keys 15 times in the middle of it, just to get it out. He smoked so much that.
And also when he said it in this tape recorder, he was already 65, 70 years old.
So he was remembering something from when he was a young man.
Like he had a memory.
He had a great memory.
Do you remember any of the pieces?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all in the Nusakh, which I'm saying.
So you adapted these elements of Nusakh from Shia Vider's father that your father remembered from when he was. Did your father sing with Shia Vider, or?
He was in the choir. He was a kid. He was a Mashur. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Would you consider singing a piece from this repertoire?
It's on the tape. I'm not now in.
You don't want to do it right now?
I can't. My voice is. I'm hoarse.
Got it. No. Hello. Apologies. I'm sorry. Momentary trick over here. Can you all hear me? Hi. I am having a technical difficulty. Geraldine, I'm going to sign off for 1 second and I'll be back. Okay? So.
Okay. I'm sorry. Some people seem to be having difficulty hearing the conversation. There's a bit of extraneous noise. I'm just wondering if you are able to hear deal with the volume on your own device, if you can make it louder on your own device. But of course, many people are hearing it fine.
Hi, everyone. Apologies about that. My computer had a brief meltdown, and I'm going to re-begin the video from where we were just watching. Apologies about that.
Thanks, Jeremiah.
I need you to allow me to screen share, Geraldine, by making me co-host, I suppose.
I think that can Mark do that? I'm a co-host, not the host.
Oh wait, no, it seems to be working. Sorry about that.
I just made Jeremiah co-host.
Thank you so much. Just a brief bit of patience, folks. I'm so sorry. How's everybody doing over there? All right, so and I'm glad that we're fixing the computer right now because we're about to hear a wonderful piece from this remarkable lineage. In case it was a bit difficult to understand, Meier Boruch was explaining that his father was a mishorer, a choir boy for Usha Wieder, who was a cantor who was the father of the well-known Yoshua Wieder. So this is a piece of the Nusakh in the Wieder family, which is unrecorded, not documented in any way, except through the familial memory of the Kohns, and which Meier Boruch and Yoel both now use in their high holiday davening. So we'll re-begin the screen share with from that moment.
We can't hear it at the moment.
You can't. Okay. Apologies. Let's try that again. Sorry about that. I forgot to hit the share sound button. All right. Fixing that, and there we are. Okay. Thank you all.
Just to get it out. You smoked so much that.
And also, when he said it in this tape recorder, he was already 65, 70 years old.
So he was remembering something from when he was a young man.
He had a memory.
He had a great memory.
Do you remember any of the pieces?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all in the Nusakh, which I'm saying.
So you adapted these elements of Nusakh from Shia Vider's father, that your father remembered from when he was.
Yeah.
Did your father sing with Shia Vider, or
He was in the choir. He was a kid. He was a Mashur. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Would you consider singing a piece from this repertoire?
It's on the tape. I'm not now in.
You don't want to do it right now?
I can't. My voice is. I'm hoarse.
Got it. No.
Did you train yesterday?
Yeah.
So you spend the whole day.
7:30 in the morning till 10:30 at night. I teach yesterday voice. Vocal coaching with people.
And he doesn't coach, like, he doesn't go into falsetto. He goes full voice the whole time. So.
Amazing. So you have students who you're teaching.
Yeah.
And are you teaching them Nusakh or teaching them
Anything they want.
I see. And are they young?
Unfortunately, people come to you for Nusakh.
Yeah.
Come to you for Nusakh.
So, all good.
So
They don't come to me to Nusakh when they listen to the tapes.
So I'm.
But you want to listen to how I'm saying your Nusakh? So most of the times I would say to myself, it's not my Nusakh.
I'm very, very interested, and I would love to.
Well,
I would love to come to you for a lesson.
That's to himself. With the students, he says to himself. To me, he always said it to me.
Mm.
It's good. It's okay. It's not my Nusakh.
So they'll never be able to get it all the way.
No, I wouldn't say that. No.
Yeah, eventually.
Listen. So this, you see, it's a combination of a lot of things over here.
Yes.
So my father, and let me try to say this kishimchu. It's not ki kishimchu kainte lesechu. You know what that is? It's a small piece of the in a sonata. Ki kishim. My voice is not good now. I would rather stay away.
Okay.
I have to take a nap of like an hour and drink a tea and eat. Zwei, drei Teilen.
You want to come back now?
No. But this is not why you came now. Not really.
I mean, hear about your life, to hear about your music, and I was definitely trying to ask you to sing a little bit along the way, but it's okay. It's not required by any means. I am okay. So
he said this kikishimchu, and he said.
Will you sing it? I don't know. I don't know this kikishimchu.
Kikishim, but you gotta correct me.
Okay.
He's gonna anyway. Lois achois v'mois hamais ki im b'shivoi midarikoi v'choyu v'yad yoi moisai tichau akeloi em yushiv miyal tekabloi emes ki atu hi oitram oy v'yatu yoidaya yitram ki haim bus arvudom.
Dat was correct. Ja.
From Yeshia Vider's father, that your father remembered from before the Holocaust, when he was observed by Yeshia Vider.
When he was 11, 12 years old.
That you reconstructed from his kind of not that amazing.
This is how my grandfather used to sound. That's how he sounded. He also was almost completely deaf, so he had a hard time keeping in tune.
Right.
So because he didn't hear himself. And he knew when he's going, he was musical, he did know it, he was new, and there was constantly this correction and overcorrection that he was trying to...
Yeah.
So
this is, I don't know if you realize, this is a really huge...
It is incredibly beautiful.
He composed through. That's, I think, in musical theory terms, what my father's trying to describe, the difference between Ushavide, Shlomo Rosen, and the people that he thinks are good Nusakh. When I grew up, my father told me there's two rules to get Nusakh, the good Nusakh. Firstly is, don't repeat the same thing twice. And every syllable should have its own note. So it's not, just don't put a couple of words into the same thing. So for instance, his the morning nusakh that he composed through. So this is basically what he's talking about. It's composing through rather than just saying, okay, this is basically the tone and I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep singing, I'm going to keep pushing all the words into it. So the morning the morning tefillah,
Shachas,
the Shachas, Yotzer, the Yotzer is the hardest one to do because there's just like one or two stanzas sort of within the actual Nusakh, within the actual melody. And you gotta keep, and it's not like Mechatoin where it's just, there's a lower part and an upper part, it's just the same thing again and again, and you gotta fill up, you gotta use it on all of it. So the way that he used to say it is, one's gonna go Shekai, Choyos Koloyitzir, Lefuneichu Adoi Shem Eloikaini, Vailekai Yavoi Saini. So even when it was not, because what's his name? He davened missive. Shlomo Rosen davened missive, and he was davening shachas. But the idea of through composing stuck around, and that's basically, in my view, the differentiator between my father and the rest of them. Because this is how a normal Chassidic Shabbat Tefillah done. Shekai Chovas Kala Yitzidim Lefunei Chuashem Lekayim Lekayim Lesayni Loi Dois Lahalai Leshabayach Lefuai Leloi Maim Lehadar and
It's even more than that.
It's sometimes
It's
worse
more
than
than
that.
that. No, it goes like a.
So
They repeat and repeat, repetitious all the time.
it's repetitious. It's a lot of. It doesn't. Not
You
every
understand?
word.
I do.
But this guy, Reb Shlomo Rosen, he never did this.
Right.
He knew how to play with this, and he was terrific.
He used those
Terrific.
constraints. He used those constraints to force
He
you.
used to say, "I'll try you one yoda through you. You're not going to hear that just like that." He said it like this. It's something else.
Nobody
You don't
does
need
that.
it.
Nobody does that. How does it
They don't even know what it's all about. They don't even know what it's all about.
So can you talk a little bit about what are you bringing out? Are you bringing out the meaning of the words? Are you bringing out the
The
feeling?
meat. Oh, now you're saying another thing. See, David Shlomo Rosen, he knew how to, Nusakh. You know about reading the Torah. You know a little bit about Pashto Min Azartum.
the Tama Mikro.
Tama Mikro. Tama Mikro is explanation of the words.
Punctuation.
Tipche, oops, esnachtu, and so on and so forth. So he did this same thing when he done. Let me take your Kippur Matzah and I'll show you a few things that he did. I wouldn't even believe that my voice is going to work like this.
The idea is, it's like using rules that seem constraining. You cannot repeat a melody. You can't push two words into the same note. But what you end up having is it forces you, now I gotta improvise, because if I can't repeat myself, I gotta improvise. If I can't put five words into a single note, then I gotta come up with 5 different notes. And it forces you to be way more involved. You have to prepare, and and that's with these 2 simple rules. If you are musical, you change the entire way that you do.
No, these rules seem to be. I have never heard a chazan articulate the rules this way that you're talking about, and I don't think that it's standard by any means, right?
It is standard. If you listen to any chazan, it is 100% standard.
Okay.
See,
I haven't thought about it.
I mean, Cardinal went all the way down to Meier, but he doesn't. There's not a single syllable he wastes.
There's a piece of tefillah like Hushai Ketzok Be'isoi.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if you know the explanation of it, do you? Naichushai, it's very hard for me to say it.
I can translate it for you.
Translate it to me.
So Naichoshev Ketzak Be'isoi Dechois B'Filili HaCharosain. Where is it? We're asking God that we should be Naichoshev. We should be considered by you Ketzog based on like the Kohen Gadol that stands in the Beis Hamikdash, I think, or the Shires or whatever. The Choiz B'Filili, push away with the power of my prayer Akaloso and any crookedness that Satan wants to bring up, because we can't be condemned without crookedness. The prosecutor needs to and we will sacrifice. Not sacrifice. We're not going to sacrifice. We're going to make you sacred. It's hard to translate the actual declension or whatever. But Shabbat Shabbosan, in this day of the most Shabbos of all Shabbosan, which is a nickname for Yom Kippur.
So just about Phyllis they say it. These about Phyllis. This is how they say it.
Yeah, just this. Peter.
This goes on. I was a kid.
This period goes on for a long time. You gotta repeat this all so ever.
No. Look what he did. I was a kid, and I was listening to him really listening with both ears, like they say. And I heard that he said, and when I was a kid, there wasn't, the Machzorim didn't have explanations in the bottom like they used to have now. And I figured about what these words, the meaning of the words, the way he said it. You know what that means? Naichu Shaib Kitzog B'Israel D'chayim B'Filili Akalusay V'nakdisho B'Shabbat Shabbat Kudaish. If you no, this he went even sometimes. Hayim b'paschal sefurim Hayim shimchu mefuarim lakdisho b'yom HaKippur.
So
you have to understand
and that melody doesn't repeat, so that's just a one time.
No, it repeats.
He's repeating, but with different.
So with different accents. But you see that the Chassidische Balfiller doesn't even know what this is all about.
Did he do some parts quickly though, like a kind of a rapid davening? He must have.
He couldn't say
the whole mosque.
He could have said like this.
Right.
Let me tell you what he said.
Tell him about the shutzer when you don't.
You know, sometimes what he did, he went like this. Let me show you what he did. Now again, you see, you're talking about 50 years ago.
Sure.
So I can't remember exactly, but
that's amazing that you remember. That's not understand. How did you learn it at the time? Did you go home and practice it immediately after?
I like to practice what he said, and I listened and I listened again and again.
But how do you listen again and again? Did he give you tapes?
No, just listening to him.
Every year. I see.
Live.
I see. Yeah.
Live. So
I know my father's Nusakh from live. I mean, not as good as he wants me to.
No, it's good enough.
Wow.
It's good
as
enough.
good as it's gonna get.
Wonderful.
You have to understand that our musical background is very, very restricted. We don't grow up listening to, especially not my father or us. We didn't grow up to listening even to Hasidic pop music. So we have very little in our heads to take up the space where. So this stuff it rattled around like a coin in an empty barrel. It was there, and it as a percentage of what we were exposed to, as a percentage of the kind of music that we were taken by. This was very big.
Right.
It has a far greater impact. It has a far greater. It registers far more profoundly in the memory than And just another thing in a large cacophony of songs.
See, he could have said, you asking me before this question, if you could say, he could say, he didn't say every piece the same.
Right.
Of course there was, like, we said, in Midnight Hatani is when Tuni Mikolam Shoinoi, the Gidas Tuni, the Mitzvah Seicho, the kind of Tuni Malkaini, Naboidu Seichu, Shukwakudoil Vakudoi, Ulaini Gurusu, Matitumuni Shem Lakani Meabu, it's Yoma Kipir Mazen, Lemchilu, Velislichu, Elechapuru, Velimchoi Boy, Escalavohino Sini Mikro Koidesh. Zeichel Yetzias Mitzroyim Imit Chatu Aini Gulini Maya Tzaini V'nizra Kakni Maya Lon Musaini V'yayna Nachni Choylem Lasois Choyloi Saini V'bayis Bechiru Seichu V'bayis Hagudol Vakudoish Shenekru Shem Chula Ibnai Ayot Sheneshtalchu V'mikdushechu Yerushalayim Hashem Lekayni Lekay V'Sayni Ay Melech Rak Mam Shetushir Yisrael Mulayni Ay Lamik Dasu. He used to say in the middle of the davening sometimes Ahoy.
Well, not Oivai is me like Clown.
This was his fast.
I think
fast journey.
This is as fast as it goes, and this is as fast as it goes for my father.
Right. So
you have to.
Dubbing takes a lot of time. I mean,
Yes, and there is no big set pieces either.
Oh, that was something I was going to ask.
So do you think that we have the entire B'chol Maminim takes 3 minutes or 4 minutes with the singing, and the rest of the Sana Toikev takes longer.
Kahanim takes a little.
Kahanim takes longer.
Kahanim takes
That's 4 words.
As a shame is the book.
And that happens 3 times during Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
So-
Meier Boruch, do you have Misharim singing the?
A little bit.
But this is a hard one because it's coloratura, and
This is something I gotta do a lot myself.
For the wordless parts, you don't have some kids or somebody
A
singing along.
little
with you?
bit, a little.
A little bit. Who are those kids? Like your children or?
My children
Good.
and my nephew.
So
My
and are
nephew-
they up on the Baliamadus
Sitting at
or?
the-
It's a close by.
I
but
sit
it's not-
close by at the table.
There's no official choir.
No.
And the thing is with these things, yeah, given my father likes to do these pieces a lot.
Yeah.
I don't get bored of it.
Right.
So because they gotta be said in a certain way. There's like very little room for improvisation.
Right. This sounds like it's quite.
It's
composed.
quite composed and it's very little.
But it's also it's like everyone. I mean, not everyone, but all chazonim sing some version of this.
Correct.
It's quite-
But you
quite-
can also
They're all, that's the thing. They all say the same version, but they don't say it correct. You can't even figure out sometimes what they're trying
Wait,
to
but
say.
when you say correct, you have come up with your own
no,
special version.
He's right. No, this is correct. We have records of what it's supposed to sound like, and you can see. You
Of
can,
the Hakohen?
yeah, Bakanim, absolutely.
From where? From who?
For many people.
For many people. For all.
Okay.
And you can see which one is a bastard of which,
Right,
which one
right,
is a
right.
bastardization of which. You can reverse engineer that one.
Mhm.
But the great thing is about this is because it's got three times saying the same thing, each one, and do it 3 times. Because I never had his crowd. Like, I never had the kind of people who are interested in listening to that much repetition and that slowly. So you can just. Skip that Google. I don't want to get the censure here. And we're done.
All in one.
Right. Oh, so you do all of them.
I do that to most of it because he does the same thing.
But don't people the da-da-da-da-da?
The first time,
Oh.
I'll give it to him.
Uh-huh.
Then it's and depends on the crowd. I
Okay.
might not even
Yeah.
do that. Most places I davened, I got mine. I was like, you can daven as long as you want, and I'm like, really? How long do you think as long as you want? An hour. I'm like, my father's Shishuna takes 2 hours, and Yom Kippur takes 3 hours, and we're talking about not including the Shtila Shemoneh Esrei.
Right.
The
Okay.
rest of Yom Kippur is
Just-
a half hour.
Right.
Just the
Alright.
loud part is 3 hours. From when he starts Baruch until it's done, that's 3 hours straight. Like I said, the parts are almost non-existent. They're like sung through, and the rest of it is just solo performance.
Right.
Which you can play with that in any shul elsewhere.
It's unusual, highly unusual. Now, what about the congregants, the call? Are they davening out loud with you on any parts or?
We're talking about the pieces that they have to say.
Yeah, I don't know.
There's a lot of sing.
There's a lot of parts
Every
where
year
you
in
can't.
Dushinsky, there was somebody who sat right behind him
Uh-huh.
and just drove him crazy. I'm not going to mention names. He's related to us. The guy considered himself knowing the thing, and
No.
he's always trying to guess what the next thing, and it's drove him
No,
crazy.
it's distracting.
So yeah, I think
It's always like that.
he prefers less help.
Are there things that are traditional in Satmar that everybody sings for certain Putim?
Like when it's on a Tolkien, it's traditional.
I tried one year not to do it.
Yeah.
What Son of Tokef has a melody that everybody sings together?
The top Merva did.
Something Rabbit sang it, and it's a worldwide thing. And Son of Tolkien is basically there's two in this chorus on the Son of Tolkien is what they call the Robjitzer, which is the Satmar Rebbe says, and one is which is the Dinner,
Okay.
which is the son.
Belgium en Zula voor ons.
What shots? Shots
Ik was
says.
een guy through.
Yeah, of course. All right, Meier Boruch,
Okay.
thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
very
your
much.
time today.
Nice to meet.
Nice to meet you, George. My hand is so cold.
It's okay. It's fine.
Yeah.
And that's it. You know my point. You understood what I'm trying to say about Nusakh.
I think so. Although I would like to learn more about this. I mean, you have a philosophy about the music which is very special, and I would love to hear you talk about it more in the future.
Yeah. Look, listen. If I'm available, maybe next time you'll meet me. I won't be tired.
I would love to come. I'd love to come to you for a lesson sometime if that's possible.
No problem.
When
are you going to be here?
Probably over the summer. So.
Contact me. You have my phone number.
I have your phone number now, so we'll definitely be in touch.
You could call me anytime.
Thank you so much.
By the way.
In passing, as we're finishing, I would love to hear your thoughts about the contemporary scene of chazonis, and especially young Hasidic singers who are involved in singing.
You said now two things. Yeah? Oh, okay. I have to cut it short.
That's fine.
Young singers, pop singers, that kind of stuff?
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, who am I talking about? Yanki Lemmer, your son Yoel Kohn, Shimmy Miller, young chazonim who sing in the. They
don't really have the way it looks now. Mm-hmm. Maybe things are going to change. The way it looks now, they don't really have a good future.
Why do you say that?
Why? Because there's no interest to it. There's no interest. Nobody is interested to sing chazonis. I sang chazonis. This Chalamoid, he was here, and my son-in-laws. They said if we're going to sing chazonis again, they're not going to come to the Suda.
But
that's what they said.
Yeah.
Do you think that they're representative of the? Are they the normal?
They are the normal. Yeah, what they call the normal. They're not normal, but they call the normal.
And what about in these kind of kumsitz parties or verbrengens?
It's all singing. It's not chazonis.
Well, there are.
I don't know.
Chazonis only concept, but I have to agree with my father. I don't think there's a future. The reason why
I have to run.
Meier Boruch, thank you so much for your time.
There's a bit of a confirmation bias in what you think is the revival of chazonis. I know that you keep mentioning the revival.
I don't necessarily mean that it's a commercial revival.
I don't mean to make you in any which way, shape, or form.
Right.
The revival is a bit of a confirmation bias because I don't remember where I was going with it. Because you are seeing people do something, and this is your introduction to chazonis, and it's not necessarily reflective of the trajectory of it, given that you're just looking at a single point. I don't think this is happening. Yes, there are still some jobs to be filled, and given the fact that the modern Orthodox community, the conservative influence on modern Orthodox, on the left-wing modern Orthodox chazonis is such that the chazonis becomes more of a sing-along, what I like to call the Marietta Little Lamp School of chazonis, where the simpler you can make it, the more audience participation. It's all about audience participation, and so what ended up happening is that they sucked the air out of the modern Orthodox chazonis pipeline, chazonim pipeline. So fewer people from the modern Orthodox went into chazonis. The only people who could fill that were the Hasidim. So yes, we see a flash in the pan right now of Hasidim become a modern Orthodox. They serve as the modern Orthodox community, but that is not a revival in either the modern Orthodox community or the Hasidim. If anything, it shows how this is now a free-for-all where everybody's scurrying around cross boundaries and trying to fill the.
But what about these singers who are doing the work? So forget the word revival. What is the motivation? Why are you doing it? And where will this music go?
Why I'm doing it is because for the first 15 years of my life, I had no art form to which I was exposed to other than chazonis. It was the only thing in any form, in any medium, visual or other, or oral or otherwise. The only medium I was exposed that had any sort of complexity, any sort of aesthetic was chazonis. So I got hooked in it. It's not indicative in any which way of the overarching trajectory of chazonis.
Do you think what you just said, that you came to it because it was basically your only outlet?
And that definitely applies to more people. Yes, but that also demarcates the peak, because in the 1980s, 1990s, when me and Lemmer and other people grew grew up, there was really truly a dearth of artistic outlets, and there was also nothing going on. Neither of those things applies right now. I mean, the internet is kind of sucking up lots of the free. We were bored out of our minds. Now, kids who need that, there's more outlets, and that's a good thing in some ways. But I don't see this survive. I mean, what does it say that Yankee, and I'm being very frank here, I mean, as much as this goes online, Yankee, who is immensely talented and is an immensely musical, couldn't make it as successfully as his brother, who just goes for the lowest common denominator. Let's be frank. I mean, again, I know both of them, and Sean is also an amazing talent, but he absolutely went for the commercial career trajectory, and good for him. But the commercial, what's available commercially tells you where things are going. Nobody, the people who underwrite these careers, and every such career is underwritten in some way or another, they don't make personal choices. They look at the market, and they're pretty good at it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be where they are. And their choice was Shulam yes, Yankee not. What does that tell you? So yeah, I mean, it's sad, but it's not really sad. This is a very old. There's absolutely nothing to Chazonis that, on paper, should have dictated that this should survive in such a slowly changing, slowly evolving form for as long as it did. And let's not kid ourselves. This is a 150-year-old art form that is more or less. I mean, maybe when you put what pulls them on one side and Carneal on the other side, you don't really see the commonalities between them. But it's more or less unchanged, and that's not the nature of things. There's just not the nature of humanity. That's not the nature of art. That's not the nature of any sort of expression. Things don't stay static for that long. And yes, we dropped the ball by not evolving this particular life form, because the only people who really held on to it were extreme traditionalists like my father, who believed that, they believe that all change is bad, and ultimately.
Yoel, do you really believe that his music is unchanged from the
No,
past?
of course.
He's a very creative man and has a very unusual philosophy about.
Absolutely, he did change. He changes more than he thinks he does.
I think
and
so.
He changes more than he admits that he does. Of course there's change, because creativeness is good, creativity is good, but he wants to create only within he wants to restrict himself. This is he's also forced to. I mean, we have this discussion every time I go on and I just go off into some exploratory phase, and he says, it's good, but I could never get away with it. I'm like, why not? You are now, nobody can tell you what to do. He's not a 25-year-old kid starting out in Rachmaninov. He basically dictates he's a genre unto himself, and he dictates what that genre is.
But so you just described yourself as going out on a limb creatively when you're davening.
When I was davening, when I was a kid, like I was 24, 25, and he listened to me.
So who's to tell you at this point in your life what you can or can't do with
right
music?
now, the market.
Right.
Now it's the market. Back then it was my father. Now it's the market.
Do you think that there are other possibilities for what you could do?
I'm gonna sit down because you seem like
Yeah, it's okay. Do you think there are other possibilities for what you could do with your music other than davening and sitting?
I'm sure there is. The question is whether I have the motivation to do that. I mean, it's kind of. I like that. I'm kind of I pigeonholed myself more or less consciously into that. It wasn't like I thought this is the only thing. No, I wanted it. I liked it, and I never pursued it as sort of a career path. I pursued it because I was a very amateur, and it's not. It doesn't love me back. So what am I gonna do? It is what it is. You gotta just accept it. Well,
Does it love your father back?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, whatever is still left there, whatever goodwill, whatever emotion, commercial desire, whatever appetite there is for that art form, he's got most of it. Now, and I mean broader than just Nusakh, even the old-timey Chazanis, because Yankee and I have conversations perennially where I'm like, Yankee, I know you want to be commercially viable, but why don't you just make a record where you have your Chazanis, you have your Yiddish stuff, and then you go and you really show your chops at something like a Reutmann's Yirotzen or something of your own, something like really, so that, you know, you can get the nerds to become your fans too, because he's losing the nerds. I pick up all the nerds. I only have the nerds. They don't pay. There's nothing there. And I appreciate him, but still there's not. And he is losing them in throws because he's singing Yiddish. And guess what? Who can judge anyone for trying to make a living and trying to sell schlock because it's the best selling thing? So even when you're talking about an overarching, almost the entire spectrum, all the way till the right, to the conservadox, all of the appetite there that wants chazanas in that range of orthodoxy spectrum my father could sort of is king there, sort of mop him up. Like even Jackie when he listens to blah, blah, blah. But that's it. That's all. That's all she wrote. There's not another batch of that consumer coming along, or if they are, not in any significant figures. This is it. We can do a fire sale right now on whatever we can cash in. This is it. This is the end of it. And it's sad, but we gotta put a tombstone on this era and recognize that it was nice. It stuck around. Nobody's writing cantatas now either, right? We love Bach, but nobody's doing his work anymore. We love Rosenblatt, we love Carneal. Nobody's doing that work anymore. It's time to recognize that it's moved beyond that.
The only thing is that some people are doing the work and doing it quite well.
What, the Bachs?
Well,
recitation.
Actually, Bach is another story, but Bach is doing great. He's probably making more money now than he was in his life. Much more, exponentially more. But even with we were talking about the death of
creating new music in that style.
Creating new music in the style. There's a cohort of guys your age, you know, mid to late 30s.
And that is it. That's what I'm saying. We are the last ones.
Yeah, but you're not. You're young. I mean, you guys
we're not.
Be here
we
for a
are
while.
products pre-internet.
That's right.
And our audiences are way older than us.
Except that you're singing to each other as well. Well, I'm saying about.
But that's the nerdy part of it, and that cannot survive. That cannot. There's an expression in the Talmud. Ein habarnis malam v'chuliyosai. You cannot fill up a ditch by digging in that ditch. So that circle jerk. I'm sorry for the. You should probably edit that out. That circular kind of. That's really not. It's not sustainable. Mm-hmm. It doesn't, like when you look at it from a cold objective sort of. All right. So what is the you're trying to put the long lens of history on it as hard as it is. Mm-hmm. You can still. It is what it is. We are products pre-internet. We grew up. We all had very restrictive fathers. I mean, I'm not exceptional, but this was just the style. Nobody brings up kids like that anymore. Nobody. We heard exhortations. We had a Isurim on the street here on Williamsburg. In these poles, there used to be bans on the music of Avram Frieda Malcha Benit because they were too poppy. They were too exciting. And now when you listen to them, they compared to even the most Satmar people who are giving out tapes, they are way more pop oriented than Malcha David ever was. So and you have these Galat with these long pants and these big beards, and it just they haven't gotten around to the 90s yet. There's still stuff stuck, late disco, early techno pop, but whatever. They'll get there. That's what's going on now, and there's no silence. Nobody's silent anymore, in general. Nobody is bored. Nobody is introspective. Nobody sits down for a second, just looks at the ceiling and hums a song anymore. It doesn't exist. And that is also part of what made us, we were all sort of artistic. We were deprived. We had no outlets. we had to focus inside. We had to become introspective in order to achieve any sort of artistic, any sort of creative outlet, any sort of creative. I don't want to use a sexual word, but in the non-sexual sense, any sort of creative climax, and that doesn't exist anymore. I look at my brothers. I mean, yeah, they're sort of, by right, they are sort of into chazanas because this is a family where you cannot avoid it if you try. But they're not in it. They don't have that need for it that we did. And as much, maybe Yankee Lemmer isn't as Yankee or the other people that you've interviewed. They're not as far away from it as I am, to be able to look back to it and say, all right, this is why this happened, because they're still in the community. They can't. It's hard to see when you're in the community how much even the community has changed, but it has. And the raw material, basically what I'm saying, raw materials are no longer there. The interest for chazanas was never very strong in the Hasidic community, and is getting even less strong, because again, the audience also needs to not have internet and not have choices in order to even discover it. Even if you're saying that it's still as attractive as it was ever, there's just too much choice, which means that the people who are going to wander on it by accident is smaller. There's also no need for that because you have everything else. So your audience in the Hasidic community is slimming out. The audience outside of the community is dying. They are aging out from it. They just, like I perform with Jackie, yeah? You have two kinds of people in the audience. People who are in rabbinical or cantorial school, and old people. And the people who are in cantorial school, they stub their noses at it because, it doesn't sound like whatever they learned in HSC or JTS. So it was everybody took a good swing at it. Chal, Jackie, Moshe Genchov, everybody else that I'm not going to go through names because I'm going to miss all the big ones. They all tried their best. They were all trying to sell to a religion. And again, I'm saying this without condemnation. They were trying to sell to the conservatives, the reform, the many shades in between. Everybody was trying to sell to the young people tradition. But ultimately, it's not tradition that people wanted, and they alighted on it. It's familiarity. It's nostalgia. And nostalgia and tradition are two very different things. Nostalgia will always be a race to the bottom, a race to the simplest thing, a race to the easiest way to get that evocative feeling. So any song with the word mama in it, and the oldies are crying rivers. And I'm not dissing that. It's just the way it goes. You can't retain a complex, nuanced form of music that requires this kind of investment of its audience. Like my father, you interviewed him, or like we were in the 80s. We listened to every single week. We just invested ourselves in it. We were committed to it, and you can't maintain that within the noisy society that we have right now.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Well, we ended with some dire prognostications about the death of Jewish music, ones that we are all probably quite familiar with. But I think it's while we can chat with Yoel and dissect his words if we want to. I think the power of the relationship between Meier Boruch and Yoel and the transmission of this musical legacy is quite in contrast, actually, with some of what Yoel was saying there at the end. But I kept that aspect of the interview because I think it's important to pay heed to the frustrations of practitioners, as well as celebrating their aesthetic achievements. Thank you all so much for your attention and for staying with us through this interview presentation. And Geraldine, should we hand it over to you to lead the next section of the conversation.
I'm happy. What a fascinating and wonderful conversation. It's been a bit of a struggle to hear all the words, and I'm probably going to ask you to transcribe it for us because it's so vital that we should hear. But people have been very fascinated. I think if you'd like to raise a question, can you raise a virtual or a real hand, and I'll try and spot you. And if you'd like to say something, I'm glad to say that Yoel is in the Zoom room, and you can ask him something directly if you want to do that.
Am I unmuted?
We hear you, Yoel.
All right, so I want to make a few points based on the chat. I just want to clear some things out. When my father and Jeremiah were talking, there's a context that was missing. Jeremiah came to my father from the perspective of hearing my father's bootleg copies, the lots of copies of his davening, and the discussion mostly revolved about my father's approach to Nusakh vis-a-vis the Chassidic approach to Nusakh. It is obviously not comparing Meier Boruch Kohn's Nusakh with everybody else, because quite frankly, my father has never listened to any non-Chassidic Nusakh other than what's on Kvartin and Rosenblatt's tape. So I just want to clarify this to start. Secondly, I feel like that final discussion with like the door handle discussion where I was just on the way out and is a little bit too frank and maybe should have been edited down to a few more succinct points. I do understand there is more nuance to it than what I was trying to say. I was just trying to make a bit of the forceful argument for the pessimistic approach, because and where I come to it is because I've been struggling a lot trying to, not just me, people around me have been struggling a lot trying to find a home for just cantorial music as a music form, rather than okay, you have a stelle, you have a position in some shul, and that's where I'm that's kind of what I'm pushing back against. There's also missing context because Jeremiah and I have been talking about this for quite a while. I consider myself now an ex-chazan because I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think there's room for what I'm selling, and what I am selling is just chazanus and nusakh without the crowd pleasing and the crowd participation formats. And of course, there are many people who meld those things together much better than I do, or I ever could, and they might have a different perspective on all of this.
Yoel, I would like to say thank you for saying what you've said. Somebody's got to say it. It's really important, so don't feel you should have held back. This is the whole point. And this is a forum where you can feel comfortable because everybody here is passionate about Jewish music and is passionate about what is happening to the cantorial world. So we can only thank you and thank Jeremiah for bringing you and for being frank. That's what we have to be. Otherwise, we lose it by default, by neglect, by not noticing what's happening.
I would like to hear, I personally would like to hear what Cantor Zim has to say, because I did mention him and I didn't even realize. I was looking at his face because he's very expressive.
I think he'd love to say, he'd love to talk. Saul, please.
It's Saul Zim. And I think there are so many different, ways that we can go. Yes, Chazanut is diminishing. The golden age of Chazanut has diminished slowly, and it has gone down because the Chazanim of yesteryear were individualistic. Each one had a style. Whether it was the Kusevitsky style, whether it was the Hirschman style, and each one loved the others, and they loved each other's style. And by the way, Meier Boruch Kohn's style was beautiful. It's Nusakh. It's authentic Nusakh. and he used it. And of course, even that Nusakh, believe it or not, was even augmented even more. You think 2 hours was a lot? It was more than 2 hours sometime. However, and that from a good chazan, I'm talking about from a chazan who knew how to take the Nusakh and take those beautiful variations of Nusakh Tefillah and mold it into different levels of style, taking it and augmenting it. However, I'm not so pessimistic. I believe that chazanut can remain, but not on the level that it was. It's got to go down. I knew that 30 to 40 years ago. It had to go down. I smelled it coming. I realized that it was coming. And Yoel, I agree with what you're saying. The golden age is gone. However, let's not be so pessimistic. There are levels. If you're talking about only the Orthodox level, yes, they don't want chazanut at all. They say we don't want even, they don't even want it in their synagogues. And why? Because we're dealing in a different world today. What's the different world? Fast Coke, fast lunch, fast this, everything is on the fast level. We take a plane, 2 hours, we're in London, 3 hours, excuse me. So what are we talking about? A chazanut piece used to take 10 minutes, one piece. So we spoke about the people of yesteryear were original chazanim. And we spoke about the people, so we all should be more positive about how chazanut can continue. I believe my own feeling was I always take chazanut and do 2 or 3 lines of chazanut, not more, not a 15 or 20 minute piece. But you do put a Chassidic or a skarbova, a beautiful with kavana little melody into it, where people can listen, can enjoy doing and listening to what it's all about.
Okay, thanks, Sol. I think I'd like some other people to have their question. Agnes, would you like to say something? If just unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so one comment and one question. My comment is that I would ever so much appreciate it if somehow I could find out what was said during this, what Joel calls doorbell or whatever discussion, because I could not hear a single word. So right now I'm a bit frustrated and upset because I want to learn. So I don't know how I could find out what was said, but I'm very keen. Now the question is that I like to know, how does all of this, a lot of it, what I heard, and even what I didn't hear, how does it connect to Satmar, which is in Hungary? And so, I mean, what language does the Satmar community use? Do they speak Hungarian or Yiddish or? And I noticed that the surname Kohn is spelled the Hungarian way, and that was my name as well. So I was so proud. And so that's a question. And thank you very so much for your patience. And sorry, I'm a bit upset.
Satmar community in Williamsburg speaks primarily Yiddish. The old timers, they knew English. I'm sorry, they knew Hungarian, but my grandparents, like whenever they didn't want the kids to understand, they didn't know Hungarian very well, but whenever they didn't want the kids to understand, they said they were gonna use Hungarian, and then they threw in one igen every few sentences, and they thought that's enough to keep us confused. It's Yiddish almost 100%. My father's father, the one who we recited the Kikishimcha from, he was Hungarian from Nanash. My mother's family was from Satmar itself. They grew up in Satmar. You have to remember that the Satmar Chassidic has very little to do with the actual geographical location Satmar. The vast majority of them are not from Satmar. They're from other places in Romania. And Satmar was Romanian before the war. They used to make the joke that they crossed countries 4 times in between the wars without ever moving house. So the Satmar community is just Satmar community. It's more of the identifying sect rather than the geographical origin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody? Rachel, you wanted to ask something. Do you unmute? Yeah.
Yes, I'm terribly sorry to ask kind of a dumb question, but it was really hard for me to hear the beginning of the conversation. So I was just wondering if you could kind of sum up in a nutshell what the Hasidic philosophy of Chazanus that Meier Boruch Kohn was reacting against was, because that didn't quite come through my audio very well.
So the backdrop against which my father was trying to differentiate himself is the death of Nusakh, which far predates the death of the general COZ, the slower death of Nusakh that Solzhenitsyn has referred to, the decline. Let's not call it. Let's not be harsh. The death of Nusakh in Hasidic community is actually ongoing for a longer time, and it was driven by two main influences. One of them was the fact that Chazanim were considered too modern, and they had shaved beards, and it was too secular, it was too out there, it was too resembling church music. In fact, when we were kids, we grew up listening to Kvarten. We had to fast forward through specific pieces. My father told us Moram de Bishmaya and Halba Chatoinu Kashele, because they were too churchy. He later rescinded that particular ban. So Hasidus has always had a pushback against Chazanus, had a pushback against artists of all stripes, because art is aesthetic, and I don't exactly know why Hasidus would be in loggerheads with aestheticism, but it is. And the second influence for the decline of Chazanus within the Hasidic community is the fact that the rabbis really don't like to share the spotlight. So if people come to daven, the rebbes, I shouldn't say the rabbis, because the rebbe is a term of art for someone who isn't a rabbi, but nevertheless has way more power than a rabbi. So the leaders of the sects, they wanted to have control over everything. And if people came to shul, this is a true story. My father would never say it on the record, but I would. My father was hired by the Kiryas Joel community to daven shacharit and the Rebbe doing his customary musaf. So, and the shul became emptier after shacharit, where people were like, all right, we had enough. We're going to listen to other people. We're going to go for a quick musaf. And my father was fired because of that, because it didn't flatter the Rebbe. So they were very open with him. They didn't even hide. They said the Rebbe didn't like it. It's doing bad things to his ego, and we can't hold on to you. So that has been repeated so many times. It killed the entire art form within the community.
So actually, one thing you said just brought up another question in my mind. You said that your father wouldn't let you listen to some of Korten's pieces because they were too churchy. I have a hard time imagining that he has spent a lot of time in churches. So I was just kind of wondering what he means by churchy and how he comes to that conclusion. Because maybe there's a secret life here.
So most of Kvarten's pieces go. something that we're familiar. What we aren't familiar with, especially growing up in the Hasidic community, is how or more on the Vishmael Homischanena. It sounded too. It sounded unfamiliar.
Okay.
So these Haben Chatoenu is that surprises that one sounds like Nusakh basically, but more on the Vishmaya. It comes back to it. More is it's not exactly plagiarized, but it sounds very much like a Verdi aria, and so it has a flavor of non-Jewish Western classical music, and it's a beautiful piece, but it's rather different from the rest of Kvartans.
It's ultra artistic, and it builds and it's too maybe too showy on that level.
That leaves the question as to why Rosenblatt all of Rosenblatt was okay, including his V'kacho Yoimer, which doesn't sound anything like V'kacho Yoimer, and all the rest of it. But I guess Rosenblatt was known to be a very pious Jew, and Kvartan wasn't. So we had to be more careful, more on the lookout for any churchy, quote unquote, influences.
But things have evolved. If you're talking about only the Orthodox Chazanut, the Orthodox and the traditional, which I love, and I grew up on it and I sing it. Only when I go to Israel, it's the only place. But we're talking about only one certain specific area. Let's talk about as you go from the conservative into the Reconstructionist or the other areas, or Amcho Yisrael. If you're talking about Amcho, then you're talking about people like to hear. Now they're starting to say, well, it's more folky. It became folky. And where did that folk come from? It's what they hear on the radios. It's what they hear around them. That's where the music is coming from. So if somebody puts in a bit of Chazanut, and that's why they're still teaching, and they should be teaching Nusakh HaTfilah in the schools, because the authenticity that Meier Boruch Kohn did, and that what Yoel Kohn is, Yoel is an excellent chazan. I mean, I love your chazanus. Your coloratura is there; it's beautiful. That's if they learn the Nusakh HaTfilah and it remains, and they fuse it with what's going on, that is only what's going to survive. Remember that. I'm just telling you that's where it's going. Yes,
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. Somebody just sent me a message. Way to throw Satmar Rebbe under the bus. Sure, anytime.
I don't know whether it's Satmar. We're not throwing him under the bus.
I'm saying about me having thrown.
I think it's beautiful. You're excellent.
Thank you. That's very nice of you. That's very nice of you to say. But I've struggled. I'll be very frank. I tried to come up with my own voice, and I've struggled. There is no market for, given that I'm not a practicing Jew, I'm not Orthodox Jew. There's no market for the old-timiness that I bring to the table outside of the community. Not enough to actually survive, and not enough to invest. And you got to invest. You got to have voice lessons. You got to go to auditions. You got to do all of that. And I am not capable, given the fact that I joined the secular community in my 30s. I'm not capable of picking up the nuances or the poppiness that I would need in order to make that combination that you speak of. So,
Yoel, it's very accessible, and you can find it, and you just go to a few people, and you will find what you're looking for. Believe me.
I gave it a good swing. I mean,
okay, I'm sure.
I've tried for 5 years. I gave it a good shot, and I'm fine. I'm okay with that. I'm not in any which way. I'm not tilting at windmills. I'm okay with it.
I understand. Well,
I thought we'd open it up to other participants. I see that Lawrence Jaffe has his hand up. You're muted, Lawrence. Lawrence, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, I've achieved that. Thanks. Thanks for a fascinating discussion. Singing was beautiful as well. Just in light of what you said about folk music, or sort of the folky sound, or indeed, I think Yoel mentioned, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but to some extent, the dumbing down of singing, so it's Mary Had a Little Lamb, so people could sing along. In that respect, let me see, how do I frame the question? I wanted to know what you thought about the whole Shlomo Carlebach situation. I mean, I'm not sure if he counts as an actual chazan, but do you think that whole popularizing or giving it, in my view, a slightly ersatz Israeli sound of common sing-along, kum sitz sort of thing, do you think that has also contributed to decline in respect for and love for chazanot? Something about Carlebach, and that doesn't seem to be very influential.
I think paradoxically he did both. He both extended the life of some of parts of Chazanot, like especially when he does Chazanot, when he does Nusakh, which he had a good Nusakh. Like
beautiful.
When Carlebach stops with the BS and starts just going off a Nusakh, he's a pleasure to listen to. I mean, he's a pleasure to listen to in general. I like him in general, but especially when he's an excellent Ban Nusakh. And at the same time, he also competed he was also crowding out Nusakh from other people. So, it's kind of hard to decide what he is.
Thank you.
It was really the Hasidic festival that brought a lot of the Hasidic music here to America and Canada and certain European cities. It was first Carlebach, and then the Hasidic festival that was created, which then eventually fused and made it important. And today's folk music is not of what Carlebach they all love to sing that, and I love it. Actually, he was someone I listened to my whole life because I learned a lot from listening to him. And just like you learn from it becomes part of your being as you listen to this type of all different types of music. He was a great baltfila. But again, people who are, I'm talking about Amcho. If you're talking about the average Jew in wherever they are, these people really need, when they come into shul, if they're going to go to shul, they want to be able to do something. Daven, the average person who's in a synagogue, let's say in a conservative synagogue, a left wing, middle, let's say even middle of the road, they can't really daven like you or I or other people can daven. It's unfortunate. It's not their fault. They didn't have it in morning, afternoon, and night. They didn't have it the way Meier Boruch Kohn lived it, or the way the average person really was able to. So my feeling is they needed to sing along, whether it's humming along. They don't even know the words. They had to hum along. But that was prayer for them. That was their prayer. That gave them ruach. When they could walk out of shul and sing a melody or hum a melody that they've heard, that was something important to them. That gave me incentive. That gave me a lot of incentive. Sorry, I don't want to take so much.
No, that's great. That's great. I wonder, Jeremiah, do you want to come back and answer some of these questions and tell us what you feel?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I would like to say, wonderful hearing everyone talk about the current state of cantorial music. It reminds me of the bon mot about the rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Cultures, it is very hard for them to die. Perhaps it's impossible. In the story of Chazonis, what's interesting to me about the work of Meier Boruch Kohn and his son Yoel, aside from the fact that I think they're wonderful artists and I love hearing them sing, is that they are doing something transformative with these specific sounds that they've learned from elders and from old records, and also with the idea of the past, taken elements of the past and transformed it into something that they can use to fuel their own creative process and their own response to their current social situations. A lot of what Yoel has been talking about today is about his professional frustrations, which are very real and connect stories about changes in Jewish liturgical music over the course of the last half century. But nevertheless, he himself is representative of this kind of churning process of historical forms being to completely disappear and aspects of return, of revival, and aspects of transformation that take place when people in the present use the past towards purposes in the future that they themselves might not really be able to understand how these processes will completely unfurl. So the cohort of young Hasidic singers who are interested in old cantorials, something's going on here that speaks to the history of Jewish liturgical music and the use of the idea of the past, right? When we look at the work of someone like Savel Kvarton, working in the early 20th century, he too saw himself as being someone who looked past to fuel his creative process, right? And and then looking at the process of liturgical reform and the new liturgical music that's emerged in the half century through the work of Karl Bach or Debbie Friedman, how the role that songwriters and participatory music making has had kind of this a change in the phenomenology of Jewish prayer. Right? That in the early 20th century, there was a kind of a peak of performance as the modality of experiencing prayer music, right? The people Jewish people were going to synagogues to hear something, right? And that their experience would be through the phenomenon of the sense of hearing, and that has in the U.S. context and internationally to an extent as well, there's been a revision of that idea, right? That the synagogue is a place where people will sing songs together and want music that will facilitate singing together in a way which is new, right? I mean, it's in the 20th century and in the late 19th, the periods when we have a lot of evidence about what Jewish prayer was like. Either people were all singing at the same time, but not in unison, right? There was this kind of heterophonic chanting of prayer texts, which didn't sound like music from the Western Europe, from the European perspective, right? Or there was cantorial performance, which synthesized elements of Jewish music with European performance practices, and people would experience prayer listening to these highly aestheticized performances. And that there's been some kind of a shift in people's understandings of how prayer should be experienced. Yoel's music and the music of some of his peers is on the idea that individual artists should use a performance frame as the basis for a liturgical experience, a prayer experience. And as Yoel has noted, he doesn't really have a place for his work, right? Or if we look to some of his contemporaries who have experienced more commercial success. I mean, Yankee Lemmer is, of course, comes to mind. Yankee, in his pulpit position, is heavily reliant on the Karl Bach liturgy and other participatory forms of music, because that's what people want in synagogue. Nevertheless, there is this phenomenon of young singers who for their own for reasons highly personal, they are looking to the archive, to the recorded music legacy of early Jewish records, for the basis of something that will speak to their personal needs. And their personal needs are not purely personal, right? There's some kind of there's a desire among singers in the Hasidic community and other Jewish communities as well to understand something about ourselves and our current experience of being the experience of being a Jew in the contemporary world, that they need recourse to something from the past in order to be able to articulate fully. And I see a lot of this with the klezmer community. I think there are a lot of parallels between the klezmer, quote unquote, klezmer revival and what I am calling the cantorial revival among young Hasidic singers. And again, it's not only among Hasidic singers, but young Hasidim are the most representatives of this musical historical process. Are there any? Would anyone like to ask make any comments or ask any questions?
Maybe Yoel would like a final word. I think it's been a real privilege to have you with us, Yoel, and to hear you sing and to hear you talk. And be nice to have a word from you.
I don't think I have anything more to contribute. We went off on a few tangents already, past what our original intent of the interview was, and that's a good thing, I'm sure. But it was great to hear back from people, both the pushing back and those who agreed with me. Of course, the truth lies somewhere between my pessimistic outlook and Jeremiah's hedged outlook, and I guess Mr. or I don't know what his title is, Alex Klein's rosy outlook. So is like all things, and plus we are prognosticating about the future, which is never good. Is always fun and never reliable. So
lovely. Look, I think that's a good moment to stop. Justin, did you want to say something briefly before we close the room? Justin.
Well, my brief question, I don't know if it's brief. I wonder how Hasidic nigunim fit into any of this. I mean, the Karlebach was largely inspired by nigunim, right? Is that at all a part of Hasidic davening, or is that a whole other thing?
I can't give you the academic view. That's more in Jeremiah's wheelhouse. From reading and from being brought up with this is this Rebbe's niggin, and this is this Rebbe's niggin, and this is this Rebbe's niggin, and this is the Rabshitz's Hayayim Pathias or whatever. My impression is that the nigunim actually replaced, when the Rebbe's decided to monopolize the pulpit, the nigunim basically replaced whatever musical fulfillment the crowds wanted to get within a davening. So that there was like a lot of, nowadays it's not so popular anymore, but even 30 years ago, 40 years ago, there used to be every year somebody would publish a tape, and for that I guess it was via not I guess we actually have the musical notation, the scores of the nigunim that used to go around in the Stetlich before the high holidays, so that people could familiarize themselves. One or two people in the town could read music, and they would go over Matzah Shabbos in the shul, and they would like just sing it out a few times, so that everybody showed up at the shul at the same time, and people recognized the songs when they showed up, when they actually traveled to the Rebbe's shtetl and participated in the high holiday performances. So yeah, that arose out of the Rebbe's davening, but there was rather than having a chazan, there was an official court composer, and many of them created wonderful songs that some of them are around. Somebody came across a batch of like a couple of hundred of them a while back, and my father uses some of them. Some of them are quite complex, musical in a way that current Hasidic music definitely isn't. And
This is a Yoel's bringing up this treasure trove of Satmar Nigunim that have surfaced in the past 10 or 15 years, something. Correct?
Berish Vishavist compositions. That was the name of the
company.
Yeah.
We should do some work on that at some point as well, because I don't think that is known at all outside of the Satmar community. And some Hasidic communities, Lubavitch, of course, being the most prominent, have done a wonderful job of being their Nigunim, and Mudgets as well, with the work of Ben Sion Shenker, released many records of their Nigunim. But Justin, just in brief, to piggyback on what Yoel was saying, Nigunim are referred to as paraliturgical, as opposed to Baltefila, prayer leading, or Chazonis, which is liturgical. So one is in the synagogue, using the set liturgy of the Siddur, and then that's the prayer leading. And Nigunim were typically sung outside of synagogue. Well, there's been an interesting phenomenon, again, as part of this transformation of Jewish liturgical practice 50 years, where Nigunim are now increasingly a part of davening, and that's as far as I understand, that's fairly new. But there were a few Nigunim that were sung in prayer leading, like the famous one is the Napoleon's March, Lubavitch Chassidim, right before Nila at the end of Yom Kippur. But generally speaking, the Nigunim are something that are sung at the table, at festive occasions, sudas at the Rebbe's Tish, not in prayer leading. But the Carlebach liturgical innovation was Nigunim into davening, right? And Yoel, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, but the Berish Vishava one, they come with commentary saying which part of davening they belong to. So there used to be 8 or 9 Nigunim, set Nigunim, that you had to relearn every year, a new Nigun, so that you'd be able to sing along at the Rebbe's davening. And those 8 or 9.
Our witching hour is coming. I would just like Alex Klein to say the last word for a moment, because you sat there very quietly. Alex, would you like to maybe thank our speakers, because this is the last moment?
Thank you, Geraldine. I have been quiet because it's been so fascinating. I understand what page Yoel's on, and I thank you for your remarks about me. I appreciate it, and I know it's. I have to be optimistic, like you, and things are looking rosier than they were. And if we polish the apple, we might get a shining example of wonderful chazonos coming back to the synagogue. It's all to do with education, and it's all to do with devakas and your neshama and understanding. So if you don't understand Saul's idea of the Nigunim and the la-la-las, so people can come away from a synagogue not being able to read Hebrew, but at least being elated and taking part in a service, which is a wonderful way, and he's been doing it for as long as I've known him, for so many years, and it's been successful. So his music is sung around the world. This has been absolutely incredible. If you want to take it further, we have a Voice of the Cantor series on a Wednesday fortnightly, and the next discussion is about the Carlebach conundrum, and we have a wonderful panel, and people are very, very welcome to join us, and to the other parts of the series, which is fortnightly. But I really, really appreciate this fantastic session. Yoel, you're a breath of fresh air. You have a wonderful voice, and please do not stop doing what you're doing. Continue to give us pleasure and enjoyment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. I'm pleased to say that next week is something completely different. We have Abigail Wood and Andrea Schmitges, who are talking about the Caravan Orchestra collaboration between Yiddish Summer Weimar, the Liszt Academy in Weimar, and the University of Haifa, which an international group of students learn together to play klezmer, Arab music, and other related repertoires. So do join us again for that. Do join us for the Voice of the Cantor on Wednesdays. If you join the Jewish Music Group on Humanities Commons, you will hear all about these events because we publicize them through that medium every week. Otherwise, we may just miss you. But thank you very much. Thank you to Mark for running the session and to Laurie who helped with the sound, to everybody who's come and who's stayed to the bitter end because it's been so fascinating. So thank you and goodbye to everybody. See you next week.